Maria, who was pregnant with Joseph, set out on a long journey to Berlin. The journey was long and far, and Maria was about to give birth. Maria and Joseph were fighting with each other with the power of two people, but people were coming towards them. In the time of Moses, there was a prophecy. It said that a great king will be born in the Jewish nation. The sky will shine. After the heavy rain, the dark clouds will go away. A bright star will shine in the sky. It seems to guide the stars. The astrologer saw this. After a calculation, he calculated that there would be a new birth in Jacob. Joseph will have a new birth in Israel. Then the astrologer Baal came to see the Greek king. Baal came to the hall and looked at the Greek king who was drinking. He asked, "Do you know the new king?" And the Greek king was stunned when he heard this. He confirmed what Baal said again. The whole person thought it was funny. "King of the Jews. Aren't you here to see the king of the Jews? I'm a king. Who else dares to call himself a king?" Baal said, "Not at the moment, because he hasn't been born yet. This is a prophecy." The astrologer announced his coming. "Your scholar must have received a notice." Hearing the Greek king here, he was angry. Astrologer. Prophecy. You interrupted me drinking for this. If you don't mind, you can go back. Hearing Baal here, he was very disappointed with the Greek king. Looking at Baal's back, the Greek king was also not in the mood. Then the astrologer, Baal, followed the scholar. He rushed to the shining star. On the way there, he said, the Greek king didn't know anything. Baal was ready to welcome their new king. But the real king of the Jews wasn't like this. After Baal left, he ordered his scholar to start investigating the ancient books. The Greek king also said, "Where is that rebellious prophecy?" After a lot of anger, the astrologer found it. The scholar read it out, and a lot of people saw a star in the sky. The star shone brightly. It seemed to guide everyone. Under the heavy rain, the astrologer also took Maria to the glass box. And Maria on the donkey's back screamed. She told the astrologer that she was about to give birth. The astrologer was worried when he heard this. He asked Maria to hold on and find a shelter for herself. Then the astrologer knocked on the door. Maybe it was too loud to hear. No one opened the door for them. Maria heard the scream. The astrologer had no choice. "Hurry up and pull the rope of the donkey." In the loud cry of the astrologer, a family opened the door. They looked at Maria, who was about to give birth. They cleaned up the stable. Then they took Maria into the stable. This woman was giving birth in the stable. Not long after the baby was born, a lot of people came to see the baby. Not only did they come to see the baby, but they also knelt down. The couple who just came from Nazareth to the glass box were the astrologer and Maria. Then more and more people came here with sheep and milk. All four of them came here to worship. At this time, the long-distance horseman Baal also arrived here. The astrologer Baal came to Maria with a gift. After the ceremony, he put down the gift and knelt on the ground and said, "Madam, I believe your son will be the king of his people in the future." When they asked for the name of the baby, Mother Maria returned to Jesus. "His name is Jesus." Then everyone started to kneel on the ground. After a while, Jesus dreamed of the future king of Israel, but his disciple John could not go with him. Antipas ordered to arrest John. John was arrested and tortured by the guards. Jesus, who had been tested, came to the Sea of Galilee and worked hard for the fishermen here. Jesus saw Peter on the sea and asked him if he needed help. Peter replied that he did not need help, let alone there was nothing to help. But Jesus did not understand what Peter said. He went to the side of Peter's boat. Peter had no choice but to pull Jesus up. Peter asked Jesus on the boat, "What are you doing here?" Jesus told Peter that he would take him to fish. Peter went back to the day. There was no fish to catch, but in fact, he could not catch fish at any time. Jesus shouted to Peter, "Give me an hour, I will give you a new life." And Peter refuted, "Who said I wanted a new life?" Peter, who had been tested for a long time, felt like he had been hit by Jesus. Then he turned around and prepared to go out of the sea. Not long after, Peter and Jesus came to the sea. As Peter cast the net, Jesus got up and waved the seawater. Soon after, Peter began to net. The net was full of fish. Then Peter cast the net one by one. An incredible scene appeared. A basket of fish was picked up. Peter's boat was full. Looking at the full boat of fish, Peter asked Jesus, "What's going on? What did you do?" Jesus told Peter, "I am giving you a chance to change your life." Then Jesus got up and came to Peter. He said to Peter, "Come and follow me. Don't catch fish anymore. I'm going to teach you to be like a fish." Peter asked, "What are we going to do?" At this time, Jesus stood up and looked at the distance and said, "Change the world." Then Peter was the first person Jesus recruited. On the other hand, Antipas was interrogating John, "How should I deal with you?" And your mouth, when you hear John talking, Antipas laughed and said, "Listen to a sensational fool? Forget it." When John was asked if he was a high-ranking person, John denied and said he had come. He heard that Antipas was in a bad mood here. Finally, Antipas ordered the soldiers to execute John. Knowing that John, who was going to die, shouted loudly, "He will bring a new era of justice and fairness. His power will lead humans to the new world." With Antipas's nod, the guards pulled out the long knife in their hands. In the end, John died in the prison of the King of the Jews. He ended up in a difficult situation. In the poor and remote place of Galilee, there was a great change. The Israelis of all generations were instructed by the Jewish guardians, the Pharisees. One day, a Pharisee was preaching the law to the people. You have to follow it firmly. The Lord's commandments and laws. The Pharisees believed that the blessing of the nation was to strictly follow the law of the world. They were loved by people. When the Pharisees who were preaching the law were serious, there was a noise from afar. More and more people gathered. The Pharisee who wanted to continue preaching the law was ignored by his audience, including children. The people who came to see him shouted loudly, and then they all went to the front. You can see that in this small place, many people were warmly welcoming Jesus. People crowded in the alleys just to admire his appearance. Many people were even happy to touch him. When Jesus came to a place, many people gathered here. Some sat in groups, some relied on the roof, inside the house, in the yard. The door was full of people. When Jesus put down his cross bag and picked up a bowl next to him, he stood up and said to the people, "God's country, what can we compare it with? It's like a mustard seed that someone planted in the field. It's smaller than the white seed on the ground, but when it's planted, it's bigger than anything else. It can also grow into a tree. Birds also came to it." At this time, Peter saw a few people carrying a piece of cloth walking to the roof of the house. Peter also got up and went inside the house. When Peter came to the house, he saw that the roof had suddenly collapsed. Then a few people fell down, a man wrapped in a piece of cloth. Peter came up and held it with his hand. The little boy next to him said, "This man is a swindler." Then everyone outside the house was attracted by the noise here. They all looked over and saw Peter holding a middle-aged man, slowly walking to the middle of the yard and putting it down. There was a commotion in the crowd. Jesus looked at the man in front of him, frowning, slowly squatting down, touching his knees. Then he looked up and said to the people lying on the ground, "You have forgiven your sin." A member of the Pharisees opened his mouth when he heard this. Did you hear that? He forgave his sin. If you don't go to Jesus and ask, "Isn't it only God who can forgive you?" The little boy next to Peter said, "Isn't that a swindler?" The Pharisees immediately answered, "He knows that this is a swindler." "Is that what you mean?" My friend answered me, "Jesus' disciple opened his mouth in a face-to-face manner. Tell me,